and welcome to the NBA Legacy Podcast. So, going back to part 3 in the series about the 2011 NBA Finals, I mentioned at the end that it was running a bit long, and that's why I cut that episode short. I didn't wrap up the series on the finals in that episode. That was the original plan. I was going to do a 3-episode run that I decided to go ahead and break it up and do one more episode on the series before I move on to a new topic. Probably could have picked a less in-depth topic to start the podcast off with, but I think for those of you that have listened to all these episodes and went through the process with me, it has shown a lot of the myths and misunderstandings and just flat-out lies that people have had about this controversial finals. Probably the most controversial finals we've had in a long time. Probably actually since the 2006 finals with Miami and Dallas. But one thing I want to talk about before I jump into finishing up games 5 and 6, ending with my conclusions on this 2011 series, is that we need to mention how the series, the NBA Finals series, was different back at this point. In 2015, the NBA made a change to the format of the NBA Finals where it would mirror the previous rounds leading up to the NBA Finals, and that the team with the best record would get home games in games 1, 2, 5, and 7, while the team with the lesser record would only get games 3, 4, and 6. Now, all the playoffs run through that format. Each series, including the NBA Finals, has that setup. But previously, mainly due to travel issues when you'd have much more media covering the NBA Finals, to a 2-3-2 series format, meaning that the team with the best record would get games 1, 2, 6, and 7 at home, while you'd get a 3-game block in the middle for the team with the lesser record in games 3, 4, and 5. So in this series, Dallas has games 3, 4, and 5 in Dallas. Miami can go home and have game 6 and maybe 7 in Miami. I was never a big fan of this. I think it actually kind of hurt the team with the better record, in that the only way you really get to take advantage of having the best record is if the series is extended. And it creates a big block when you have 3 straight games in one team's home arena, that eventually the team that is on the road in those 3 straight games, their play will start to slip. And I think that's been pretty evident when you go back and look at the series, that there's usually a moment in those 3 games where the team that's on the road starts to wear down a little bit and has a bit of an erratic performance. But that said, it's a fair argument to ask, what series can you look back on and say that if this format was changed, the result would have been different? The team that eventually won, if it had been a 2-2-1-1-1 format like the rest of the playoffs, wouldn't have won, and that the team that lost would have actually benefited and won the title instead. This is the one series, though, I look at and wonder what happens if instead of having to play Game 5 in Dallas, Miami has Game 5 at home. As we mentioned at the end of the last podcast, LeBron James came off a pretty rough game, to say the least, and was getting just butchered in the sports talk radio and sports media in general. I often have wondered if LeBron is able to go home, not even just LeBron, but Miami as the team. So they lose game 4, it's a 2-2 series, and they go home for game 5. Does LeBron play better? Does he rediscover his aggressiveness? Or is it simply that they go home and a lot of their role players make more shots, and all of a sudden we're looking at a different series? Well, the thing for Miami is they still had to play in Dallas. So they won game 3, went up 2-1, lost game 4. It's a 2-2 series. Miami still has 2 of the 3 games at home, but the pivotal game 5 that's going to decide who's going to take the lead in this series is played in Dallas. Heading into game 5, there was a lot of fallout from LeBron's performance in game 4. And heading into game 5, LeBron certainly didn't lessen any pressure on himself. After leaving Cleveland in the summer of 2010, LeBron started his Twitter account and started being a little bit more active on social media. And at this point, in between games 4 and game 5, he would be up late at night and tweeting things like, now or never. And then saying to the media that this was the biggest game of his life. Now, he can feel that way, and maybe it was true at that point. But I think it's proven out to be a very smart road to take, that after this year, LeBron would stop using social media during the playoffs and would focus on the task at hand as opposed to what everybody's saying. You can see at this point that LeBron is super worried about how losing will affect his image and, I guess you could say, legacy. The idea that he went to Miami, made this big show about how easy it was going to be to win, and then to not succeed was creating a lot of anxiety, I would say, for LeBron. It's one thing, before I get to Game 5 and Game 6, it's one thing I do think that is really weird when you go back and rewatch this. While I'm sure if you're a Mavericks fan or somebody that really disliked Miami and LeBron, this is a series you look back on fondly. To me, when I go back and watch it, it's kind of a little bit awkward or cringeworthy or, I don't know, even kind of painful, because it's almost like watching someone who strikes out, like when asking a girl out, or seeing someone be super let down and shot down by some sort of situation, because it's not so much that that LeBron fails and the Heat fail, it's that how it's done and how it happens, it's such an awkward rewatch, because it's like watching someone who is going through a lot of anxiety and stress and knowing the outcome doesn't help their situation. Some series I think are fun to go back and watch, even if the team you rooted for at the time loses or who you picked doesn't win. But this series, to me, going back and watching it, it's been super fun to go back and watch Miami's road to the finals, and even more so for Dallas. Their run to the finals is really entertaining, a little bit underrated. But this final series is kind of brutal. So with that said, let's talk about one of the games. Early on in Game 5, LeBron does actually start out pretty aggressive. He doesn't shoot the ball well in the first quarter. His first shot, he actually gets into the lane, but short arms it and misses his first shot. But he does start out aggressively on the boards. You can see he's trying to get himself going that way, that it's not so much that he trusts his shot, which I think at this point he definitely doesn't, but that he feels like if I get on the boards, make an impact that way, the offense will come. And you can see all the pressure on his face, all of the anxiety, all of the stress. When you watch this game, more so than probably Game 4 even, you can see on LeBron's face that he's terrified of failing. One little nice matchup adjustment that Carlisle makes was in Game 4, when it was obvious LeBron wasn't being aggressive and looking to score. Rick Carlisle switched the matchup. Instead of having Jason Kidd guard Dwayne Wade and Sean Marion guard LeBron, he switched that and had Sean Marion guard Dwayne Wade and put Jason Kidd on LeBron. Jason Kidd being smaller, but LeBron wasn't being aggressive. It seemed like Carlisle had the idea that LeBron was going to try to go and be aggressive in this game, and so he flips that matchup back and goes with Sean Marion back on LeBron and Jason Kidd back on Dwayne Wade. While LeBron does start the game aggressively trying to get his own shot and his rebounds, Dallas opens up with a big flurry on offense, causing Spoelstra to call a timeout for Miami, with Dallas leading 13-6 with 7 minutes and 19 seconds left in the first quarter. Miami opens up very sloppy, 4 turnovers in the first 6 minutes. Miami will come out of that timeout and stabilize a little bit. This first quarter of Game 5 will be the highest scoring quarter in the series so far, with Miami leading at the end 31-30. Mario Chalmers will hit a ridiculous 3-point heave at the buzzer to give Miami that 1-point lead heading into the second quarter. LeBron doesn't end up having a great first quarter, only shooting 1 of 4 from the field, and has 2 points. But he will finally start to get his rhythm back a little bit in the second quarter. Starts off really strong in the second quarter with a great offensive rebound off a Chris Bosh miss, giving Miami a 3-point lead, 33-30. The game will go mostly back and forth through the first half of the second quarter. Miami will be up 3 still, 47-44, with 6 minutes and 30 seconds left. The game will go pretty back and forth until Miami builds a little bit of a lead at the 5-minute mark left in the second quarter. Miami's up 50-44, but Dallas then goes on a really strong run with great plays from Jason Terry, Tyson Chandler. Dirk hits some very pretty shots and actually makes a nice pull-up jumper to give Dallas the lead going into the second half, 60-57. Miami is fighting here, but it really does feel at the half that Dallas is in the driver's seat and in control, even though Miami has led for a decent portion of the game. Dirk actually has a really big quarter. 10 points, but it's 4 of 5 shooting. Hits really big shots to give Dallas the lead again after Miami looked like they might have been pushing away a little bit. LeBron does find his way here a bit more, much more active than he was in Game 4. He'll have 7 points in this quarter, which will actually give him 9 points for the half, and 6 assists and 5 rebounds. That's his first half stats. 9 points, 6 assists, 5 rebounds. Almost matching what he did in all of Game 4. And it's not just offensively, he's actually pretty aggressive defensively as well. It's very possible if even this LeBron shows up for Game 4, Miami's up 3-1 at this point in the series. One big development for Miami at this point was that early in the first half, Dwayne Wade had bumped into Brian Cardinal and was suffering a lot of hip pain and wouldn't actually start the second half. They would start Mike Miller in Wade's place. This actually ends up being a little bit of a nice stretch for Mike Miller, probably the biggest contribution he makes to Miami in this final series. He's able to get open for a couple threes that LeBron finds him for the assists and keeps the game within reach without Wade on the floor. LeBron will actually hit a tough fadeaway jumper over Dirk himself and keep the game tied at 65-65 with 9:02 remaining in the third. And then there's a play at 7 minutes and 5 seconds left in this quarter where I remember when I was watching this series that Dirk hits a rainbow 3 over a really great contest from Chris Bosh. Bosh really gets out and challenges the shot, and Dirk, the shot probably has to go 20 feet in the air before it, maybe not that high, but it goes, it's a rainbow, it's beautiful. And I remember when Dirk hit that shot, that was when I really thought Dallas was going to win the title. That when he's hitting that kind of stuff, that when you have a team that's coming back from all these deficits and making these kind of almost miracle shots, that it's too much, and I felt like they were going to be the champion with that one shot. Even though it isn't a big shot in terms of giving them a lead, it gives them a lead of 70-65 and isn't a huge turning point in the game, but it's a very memorable shot for at least me. I think it's another moment that really encapsulates how great of a run this has been for Dirk Nowitzki. But that said, LeBron does answer on his own. He makes a tough fadeaway jump shot along the baseline. And with 6 minutes and 7 seconds left in the third quarter, the lead is still 73-69. You can see, as I'm mentioning these jump shots and stuff that LeBron's hitting in the passes he's making to Mike Miller, that LeBron is a lot more active in this game. That he is starting to play more like the LeBron James we've known. Still not shooting the ball well, but I think up until this point in the third quarter, LeBron has been really good in this game. Wade, though, will check back in at the 4:33 mark of the third quarter. Dallas is up at this point, 75-71. And while that seems like it'd be a nice get for Miami, Dallas answers with Jason Kidd knocking down a 3 to give Dallas a 78-71 lead. And then the next possession down for Dallas, Chandler gets an open dunk, 80-71, 3 minutes and 46 left in this third quarter. Looks like Dallas is starting to pull away. Miami will call a timeout after this Tyson Chandler dunk. LeBron will hit a jumper over Sean Marion to cut the lead back to 7. But then Jason Terry comes down and hits a pair of long twos that pushes the lead right back up, 84-77. And Dallas will hold the lead going into the fourth quarter by 5 points, 84-79. It goes forgotten a little bit, and I think Miami themselves had a little bit to do with this, that this idea this was a series where Miami rolled over a little bit, that this was actually a pretty well-contested series, and that Miami, when they were up against the wall, they did fight. The outcome doesn't end up in their favor, obviously, but they did actually put up some resistance here, more so than, say, like the Lakers did. Miami's able to actually battle back and make it a game in the fourth quarter, even though it looked like there at the close of the third that this was going to maybe run away from them and Dallas was going to win. Going away, LeBron will make a super pretty wraparound pass to Udonis Haslem, cut the score 95-92 with 6 minutes and 27 seconds left. Wade will actually strip Sean Marion on a Sean Marion post-up and hit the ball ahead to LeBron. LeBron will then pass back to Wade for a layup, cutting Dallas's lead down to 95-94 with 6 minutes left to go. This actually gives LeBron James a triple-double for the game. Miami will actually lead 96-95, 5 minutes, 16 seconds after Wade finds Haslem for an open dunk. And then even the next possession down, Wade makes a three to put Miami up by 4, 99-95, 4 minutes and 36 seconds left. This is a 9-0 run by Miami in the fourth quarter. After they looked like they were dead going into at the end of the third quarter, they've been able to not only rally back and make it a game, but they actually have a lead here going towards the closing minutes and a chance to go up 3-2 going back home to Miami for games 6 and maybe 7. The next possession down for Dallas, Dirk is able to draw the foul on Chris Bosh by baiting Bosh with a pump fake. It is a really bad foul from Chris Bosh. Completely kills Miami's momentum. It's a pump fake that's not even that well sold, and Bosh just immediately springs to his feet. You can credit Dirk for this, for the idea that he has been so lethal and such a great jump shooter that Bosh just immediately goes for the contest, but it's able to stabilize Dallas a little bit here, cutting the lead 99-97, so they're only down 2 when Miami had all the momentum. Bosh gets fouled the next possession down for Miami, but it makes only one of 2 free throws, giving Miami a 197 lead, and Jason Terry will match right away back down the floor, makes a huge three, ties the game 100-100 with 3 minutes and 21 seconds left. These next few possessions really tell the story almost of the 2011 finals. LeBron will miss on Miami's possession. Dirk gets the ball down for Dallas next time, makes a quick move along the baseline, dunk, giving Dallas the lead once again, 102-100. Next possession, LeBron gets called for a charge. It's a bit of an iffy call. Tyson Chandler draws the foul. I'm not sure he got quite set, but LeBron isn't making plays that he needs to at this point for Miami to win the game. Next time down, to make it even worse for Miami, Jason Kidd makes a three to push the lead up to 5, 105-100, 126 left. Now, in a couple of seconds, Jason Terry is going to make a really big three that people still talk about to this day that pretty much ends the game. But this Jason Kidd three deserves more credit than I think that Jason Terry three does. Jason Terry makes the three in LeBron's face from the wing, but Jason Kidd making this three to give Dallas a 5-point lead kind of closes the door a little bit. Wade will turn the ball over the next possession. LeBron, though, gets down the floor and contests Sean Marion right at the rim. Great defensive play, able to force Marion to miss on what would have been a fast break opportunity. Bosh will get the ball back down for Miami, gets fouled. Once again, just makes one of 2 free throws, scores 105-100 with 56 seconds left. And at this point, it's when Jason Terry makes the three right over LeBron that gives Dallas the lead 108-101, and that's pretty much it. Dallas will hold on to win 112-103, and they'll take a 3-2 lead in the series going back to Miami. A lot of people like to remember that Terry shot and use it as somewhat of a criticism for LeBron. But it's a shot that, honestly, the game wasn't super in doubt when Jason Terry made it. It was more of an explanation point on Dallas's win, more so than a huge game-altering shot. Dirk has a really nice game, 9 of 18 for 29 points. Jason Terry, this is probably his best game of the series, but comes up really huge. Is able to make nice plays in the second quarter when Dallas comes back from Miami going up early, and then also in the fourth quarter making big shots, also stemming Miami's run. 8 of 12 for 21 points. Really gave Dirk a second star on this night. Dwayne Wade ends up playing the entire fourth quarter and the last 4 minutes of the third quarter, even though he was suffering that hip pain. 6 of 12 for 23 points. Bosch also shot 6 of 12, had 19 points and 10 rebounds. A couple of those missed free throws really hurt, though. That bad foul on Dirk may have kind of cost Miami quite a bit there. LeBron, though, 8 of 19, so he's taking more shots, not shooting the ball very well. 17 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists. I'm going to say it. LeBron doesn't have a great fourth quarter. There's a lot of criticism of LeBron in this series, especially in the fourth quarters. But LeBron is actually good in this game. It's not good enough for Miami to win. It's not what Miami needed. But LeBron has a good game. Not a great game by any stretch of the imagination, but not bad. And makes some really nice plays, both offensively and defensively, and makes some really tough shots. It's just one of those games where Miami plays a really tough game, but Dallas is just better. They get more contributions from across the board, and their guys made big shots when it mattered. So, at this point in the series, Dallas is up 3-2. And so we're going back to Miami for games 6 and 7. Now, the year previously in the NBA Finals, you'd had the Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics, with the Lakers having home court. The series actually went pretty similar to where after Game 5 in Boston, Boston had went up 3-2, going back to LA for the last 2 games. The Lakers would blow out Boston in Game 6, and would then win a really close Game 7 in the final minutes. At this point, I was believing Dallas was going to win the title, but I think there was still a really strong contingent of people that thought Miami would go home, figure it out, and would win in 7 games. And do the same thing the Lakers had done the year before. Going into Game 6, Erik Spoelstra makes a little bit of a lineup adjustment where instead of starting Mike Bibby, he instead starts Mario Chalmers, who has actually played pretty well for Miami throughout the series. And in this series, Carlisle definitely is the guy to make more adjustments and more moves than Spoelstra does. Although, to be fair, Carlisle does have more pieces to move around the chessboard. LeBron will open Game 6 much better than he has any of the games in this series. Starts off by making a 3 and will have Miami's first 5 points. LeBron will actually make his first 4 shots for 9 points, and Miami will start out hot with, after a Chris Bosh jumper, being up 20-11 with 6 minutes and 16 seconds left in the first quarter. Really looks like this game is going to go Miami's way. Dirk picks up 2 fouls with 5 minutes and 11 seconds left. But Dallas will actually go on a run without Dirk while he's on the bench, finally taking the lead after a Brian Cardinal corner 3, 23-22, 3 minutes and 30 seconds left. Dallas will actually close the quarter on a 17-5 run after Dirk picks up his second foul, being able to withstand Miami's hot start to lead 32-27 going into the second quarter. The start to the second quarter is almost a complete disaster for Miami. Very sloppy on both ends. Miami will actually allow Dallas to build a 40-28 lead with only a couple minutes gone by in the quarter. But the Heat will fight back and rally, going on a 7-0 run of their own, forcing Carlisle to call a timeout at the 8:30 mark. cutting Dallas's lead to 5, 40-35. They'll continue to build a little bit of momentum. Bosh hits a jumper to cut the lead down. Eddie House will actually hit a 3, giving Miami a lead again, 42-40. 14-0 run by Miami after that initial really ugly start. Really probably could have played Eddie House more in this series. House is not anything on the defensive end. He doesn't really give you any kind of positional defense, but he can make shots. And I think the idea of giving House a little bit more playing time, the ability to spread the floor around Wade and LeBron, was something that Spoelstra should have gone to more earlier in the series, and that while it's not enough for Miami to withhold Dallas here in this game, looking back on it, Eddie House should have gotten more opportunities early on. A constant theme throughout this entire run, not just the finals for Miami, looking back on the games, is how much better they looked when they had shooting, and how it hadn't yet been identified that that's how they should play. And wouldn't actually even really be identified until the playoffs the following year. One thing that is really kind of hilarious when you go back and watch this is Dirk is really bad. In the first half, he shoots 1 of 12 and has 3 points. Easily his worst game of the series and probably the playoffs, at least up until this point. Probably his worst half of the playoffs, definitely of the finals. He cannot make a shot. Throughout the quarter, the game goes back and forth. Miami will lead 49-48 with 3 minutes left to go. And then Jason Terry will make some really big shots for Dallas. He'll step into a wide open 3 after some awful Heat defense, giving Dallas back the lead 51-49. Ends up having 19 points in the first half, 8 of 10 from the field. Really comes to the rescue as Dirk cannot find a shot. So with Dirk going 1 of 12 for the quarter, though, Dallas will lead going into the second half, 53-51, on the verge of winning a championship. For all the criticism of how LeBron plays, and we'll get to the summation here in a little bit, throughout this series, he continues to make really nice plays, regardless of how well he's scoring or how aggressive he is. Starts off the third quarter, he'll find Mario Chalmers for a 3, and then Chris Bosh for a long 2. Gets Miami back ahead, 56-55. But Dallas will quickly answer with J.J. Barea making some baskets. Tyson Chandler and Sean Marion kind of beat Miami up on the offensive glass a little bit. Dallas will go back in front, 63-56, with only 3 minutes gone by in the quarter. At this point, Miami starts to look a little deflated. But they do come out of the timeout and once again put up some fight, cutting the lead back down. Now, here comes the play at this point here in the third quarter that inspired this entire podcast. I said before that in the introducing little snippet I released that J.J. Barea guarding LeBron is the image you often see posted from this series. And up until this point, this is the first time, and it's the only time, that J.J. Barea actually gets switched off onto LeBron. It's simply that Barea gets switched off on LeBron in transition. LeBron will start to back down, and then LeBron gets called for the offensive foul by pushing J.J. Barea down. Off the back down, right. LeBron has been endlessly mocked for this play. Here's the thing. I'm going to say it. J.J. Barea flopped. That's right, I said it. LeBron does raise his arm when he's backing Barea down, but it's not a push-off. Barea completely flails back and falls to the ground, and it's not really that much contact. It's something that I've always hated about when you see this happen when a small guy gets switched off onto a big and the big starts to back down. The number one thing the small defender always does is just fall to the ground. And more often than not, the ref will actually give that small defender the benefit of the doubt instead of going, no, you're small, you've switched off onto a guy you're giving up height and weight to. You've got to defend that position. And that's what happens here. Barea gets switched off on LeBron. LeBron gives him a little bit of leeway with the raising of his arm on the back down, and Barea flails and flops to the ground. It never should have been seen as this big moment or defining moment of this series. It wasn't. It was a fluke play, a fluke possession, and probably a wrong call. That said, LeBron had it coming. He has flopped his own fair share of times, and will continue to in the future. What hurts, though, is out of that turnover from LeBron on the offensive foul, Jason Kidd drills a three to put Dallas up 68-62 with 6 minutes and 14 seconds left in the quarter. Throughout this quarter, Miami keeps its head down and keeps trying to fight, but slowly but surely you can really see the frustration and the desperation growing, that they can sense this is going to go Dallas's way. As a sign of where Miami's at in the series, Jan Mahimni makes an 18-foot jump shot at the buzzer to put Dallas ahead 81-72 going into the fourth quarter. Dirk's finally able to get on track a little bit at this point. He's shooting 3 of 7 from the court for this quarter with 8 points, finally starting to get on the board. It looks like Miami is going to make a bit of a fight of it in the fourth quarter and try to force the Game 7, but JJ Barea will make a dagger 3 with only about 90 seconds gone by in the quarter, gives Dallas an 84-77 lead. Miami never really threatens again. Dallas will hold on to win 105-95 and win the series 4-2. Dirk will be named Finals MVP, obviously. And that's it for the 2011 Finals. At least for the games, not for the podcast. Dallas actually only outscores Miami by 14 points in this series. 568-554. It was actually a really close series. Dirk will average 26 points, 9.7 rebounds, with 42% from the field, 37% from 3, 54% true shooting, and 98% from the free throw line. Jason Terry really ends up picking up towards the end of the series, averages 18 points, 49% from the field, 39% from 3, 60% true shooting. Really, really nice numbers. Shawn Marion, a bit of the unsung hero throughout this series. Early on, I think he definitely gave Dirk a second option until Jason Terry started to find his way in the later games. 13.7 points, 6.3 rebounds for Shawn Marion. Tyson Chandler, 9.7 points, 8.8 rebounds, 59% from the field, 63% true shooting. Bosch will have better numbers in this series with 18.5 points, 7.3 rebounds. Will only shoots 41% from the field and have a 50% true shooting. But while those points look nice, Tyson Chandler is the best non-Dirk big in this series, and it's not that close. JJ Barea has 8.8 points for the series, 38% field goal, only 33% from 3. Not quite as effective as he'd been against the Lakers earlier in the playoffs. Dwayne Wade for Miami has a great series, 26.5 points, 7 rebounds, 5.2 assists, 55% from the field, 61% true shooting. Only 30% from 3, but Wade was never much of a three-point shooter. LeBron's numbers for the series, 17.8 points, 7.2 rebounds, 6.8 assists, 48% from the field, 32% from 3, and 54% true shooting. So, at the beginning of this series, of the podcast, not of the 2011 Finals, I asked questions out there that I wanted to answer going back and reviewing the series and the build-up to the series. And one of those questions, to start with, was how good would we say the Miami Heat supporting cast was, looking back on the series? There's definitely a perception out there that this Heat team was pretty thin. It's what I thought going into the podcast, looking back on it from my memory. It's a bit of a mixed bag though, when you look back on it. Getting Mike Miller and Udonis Haslem back for the finals was a really big get for Miami heading into the series. I don't think it would have been as close at times if those two guys hadn't been able to get back into the lineup. Udonis Haslem will average 6.7 points, 5.2 rebounds, and really plays the best D on Dirk throughout the series. Mike Miller has a bit of a rougher time, doesn't shoot the ball well here. He's coming back from injury. Doesn't seem like he's quite as back as Haslem is. 3.5 points is what he averages for the series. 30% field goal. Still averages 39% from three. Guy that actually was a bit of a revelation for Miami at this point was Mario Chalmers. Should have started over Bibby the whole way. I understand Spoelstra wanting to go with the veteran and Bibby, but Chalmers outplays him for the entire series. Averages 11.8 points, 43% from the field, and 40% from three. Was good on both ends for Miami in this series. Bibby wouldn't even play in Game 6 after the heater up against the wall. He only averaged 3.8 points per game, 35% for field goal, and 29% from three. Bibby gives you almost zero on defense, and to only shoot 29% from three really hurt Miami to have that coming from a starting position. Eddie House, in the Game 6 that he played, actually made some threes and would have spread the floor for Miami. As I said during the game, I think Eddie House should have played more. He hurts you on D just like Bibby, but there was a chance he would actually make his threes, and that could have given Miami a nice boost. At this point, I don't think it's controversial to say that Rick Carlisle outcoached Eric Spoelstra in this series for Dallas. Spoelstra was only on his third season. He'd coached two teams before this for Miami that were not title contenders by any stretch. And this was his first real run at being a contending team and being really in the spotlight. And this was a Heat team that had been in the spotlight far more than any team in NBA history really had ever been at this point. And it's a lot for a third-year coach. I think he actually did a pretty good job looking back on it. But Carlisle, on his resume, this is the first thing that's mentioned, right? This is the top achievement of his career, and Carlisle does a masterful job throughout the playoffs for Dallas. It's why he's still the coach in Dallas at this point from this run. In Game 4 for Miami, when LeBron is really struggling, there doesn't seem to be any effort from Spoelstra to really try to fix that situation and try to get LeBron going with some easy baskets or get him going to the basket with some momentum or any kind of solution. It's more like there's tunnel vision for that team, that they're trying to really get Wade his shots and maybe get Bosh going a little bit, but the LeBron's just going to figure it out. And I think that's, looking back on it, separating the idea of what it means for how LeBron played and mentally and whatever you want to say, choking the pressure or whatever. We'll get to that here in a second. From a coaching perspective, it feels like that should have been recognized more in the moment and not just left out there as something that the player has to figure out on their own and not try to change it yourself as a coach. Also, I think some of the rotations, I mentioned Eddie House. I don't get why James Jones couldn't get any minutes in the series. He doesn't give you a lot of defense, but I think there was places you could hide him on. You're not going to see them run a lot of post-ups for like Jason Kidd on James Jones, and I think that floor spacing would have been a big deal. That's something you see in the next few years for Miami with getting guys like Ray Allen and Shane Battier and stuff, that floor spacing becomes even more paramount for them. And I think they had some of those tools here in this series to really exploit and give Wade and LeBron some more room when Dallas was being able to cut off their attacks to the basket pretty well. As the series would go on, you saw that in the first few games, Miami was able to get out in transition and get to the basket a little bit more. And as the series went along, Dallas did a really great job of walling off the paint and keeping Miami out of transition. Really hurt LeBron, especially, without being able to get those easy points at this time in his career. And while I think that Joel Anthony gives Miami a lot of good moments throughout the playoffs. If you're playing him 20 minutes a game in the finals, starting him and having him play all 6 games for you, it gives you such a disadvantage offensively that he averaged 1.3 points per game, 3.5 rebounds, and he shot 29% from the field. Other than someone that is actively taking shots away from your stars and missing them, that's about as damaging offensively as you can get. In this series, I would say Miami only had maybe 5 real guys: LeBron, Wade, Bosh, Haslam, and Chalmers, that they could really rely on from game to game. Mike Miller, as I said earlier, was still injured. Dallas just had so much more depth. If you take away Dirk from their game, right, I think Dallas has, because it's unfair. If you keep Dirk, Miami obviously plays Dirk. But if you take away Dirk, I think Dallas still has 8 guys that would have gotten minutes for Miami in this series, not just throughout the season, in this series. Haslam would play for Dallas, for sure. Mike Miller, probably. I think him and Peja Stojakovic, there's a debate there. Chalmers versus J.J. Barea. I think that it's close, but I think J.J. Barea, with his ability to get in the paint, would play over Chalmers. I'm not sure Chalmers gets very many minutes on Dallas. But after that, that's a huge depth advantage. And it's really what propelled Dallas, considering Bosh and LeBron didn't have great series. They had to have really spectacular series for Miami to be able to overcome that lack of depth and the advantage that Dallas had by having so many more players that were playable in an NBA Finals series. This will lead me into the other question I asked, which was Dallas the better team? Or did the right team win, right? I'm going to say yes. I think Dallas was the better team, and that they deserved to win this title. Dallas never quit. They always fought, regardless of how far down they were, throughout the finals and the rest of the playoffs. Played with spectacular poise. That said, though, the Heat could have won this series. They absolutely had their chances. On paper, you have 3 All-Stars of Wade, LeBron, and Bosh. And Dallas really only has 1 All-Star in Dirk. I think some of the guys on Dallas play up to an All-Star level at times. But, as I said, on paper, Miami has 3 All-Stars to 1 for Dallas. And I think that any of the following Heat teams, especially the 2 title teams, 12 and 13, would have beaten this 2011 Mavs team if you were able to just transport them back and have them play the series instead of this 2011 version of Miami. That those other Heat teams beat Dallas for sure. But all the excuses aside, the right team won this series. I don't look back on this and see it as a series where, kind of like 2016, where Golden State should have won that series and Cleveland took the title from them. This series, Dallas was the better team. Miami had more talent up top for sure, but Dallas was the rightful champion. And we forget that a lot of times when discussing this title run, they didn't just do this to Miami. They did it to Kobe and the Lakers and Durant and the Oklahoma City Thunder in the conference finals. It was a hell of a run. And I think if we look back on it and Miami had won this title, it might feel a little bitter and that this should have been Dallas's time. I asked at the start of the podcast how the Heat's failure to win this title ranks in terms of other past playoff upsets and failures, a la, as I said, the 2016 series, the 2004 Lakers losing to the Pistons, the 2006 Mavs losing to the 2006 Heat, those kinds of upsets. And going back to watch the series again, I think that perception that this was a failure by Miami says more about sports media and the fandom than it does what actually happened in the series. Anyone that really watched Dallas and how they completely took apart the back-to-back defending champion Lakers should have been able to see this. They were capable of winning the series. That Miami having all the star power, okay, they're the favorites, but this was not a big upset victory that anyone before this series happened. More of us should have been able to look at it and think, yeah, Dallas can do this. And because Miami has home court and the star power, they definitely should have been the favorites, but only a slight favorite, and that Dallas definitely had enough to win the title. Miami definitely shouldn't have been an overwhelming favorite heading into this series. I'd asked in the first podcast of the series how good Tyson Chandler was, and I want to fold that into the Dirk question of how good Dirk's run actually was. Because Chandler, he didn't step up and become the second star to Dirk in the way a lot of people remember him doing in this series. Many of the Mavs really stepped up and played like stars in different moments. Sean Marion had a great final series. Jason Terry hit huge shots, especially later in the series, and seemed like he couldn't miss at times. I said earlier, Tyson Chandler is the best non-big in the finals, and that's very true. Bosch scores more, but Chandler has the bigger impact, both defensively and just as the spirit of the team. I think a lot of the Mavs have come out and said since this title that Chandler set the tone defensively and was the guts of the team. And I think they definitely don't win the title without Tyson Chandler making that defensive presence and defensive difference, not just against Miami, but against the entire playoff bracket. I think actually Dirk's best series of this entire playoff run was against Oklahoma City. The couple games he has there, especially game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, are legendary and something that anyone should go back and watch. As good a shot making as you will ever see, and as skilled a performance offensively as I've ever seen. I think it's up there with anybody you want to name. The ability to make shots and to continually make free throws and just punish a team for not being able to stop you on the offensive end. That conference finals is as good of a series as almost anybody has ever had. And the thing is, though, in the finals, Dirk has really nice moments and has some really big shots and nice games. But Miami does a really good job on him, actually. He doesn't shoot the ball that well throughout the series. He slows down from the conference finals, for sure. Now, he had a fever in game 4, which I think disrupted him and, hampered him in that game, driving his stats down a little bit. But as you can even see in game 6, he cannot make a shot. And I think that Miami does a pretty good job at making things a little bit more difficult for him than some of the other teams had previously. He deserves all the praise he gets. Dirk does for this run. It's absolutely legendary. I think I go back and forth on who I rank second in terms of all-time power forwards. Tim Duncan's obviously number 1, but after that, to me, it's either KG or Dirk. I have Malone and Barkley further down, but it's between those two, Dirk and KG. And it's hard when you watch this type of run in this championship not to think Dirk's probably the second best power forward ever to play. And that brings us back to the question that everybody always talks about and we'll debate till the end of time. And it's whether or not LeBron James choked in this final series. Yes. I'll say it again. Yes, LeBron James choked in the 2011 NBA Finals. His series isn't nearly as bad as people remember it as being. But it's hard to argue that he seized the day. That the opportunity to win a championship was in front of him, and he did everything he could to win it. That didn't happen. One thing when I think about this question that I always come back to is I think you can take any following version of LeBron, right, from 2012 to now, and if you put that version of LeBron in the 2011 version's place, so if we take the 2015 or 16 LeBron and put him on the 2011 Heat, Miami wins this series, right? I mean, I don't think that's really that debatable. that if you give them a better version of LeBron, a more decisive LeBron, a LeBron that has more confidence, Miami wins this series, and it might be a sweep. I said this in the podcast talking about Game 4, that I don't think LeBron is necessarily bad in this series. Like, I don't think I'll look at this and think it's somebody who, shot the ball really badly or sabotages his team by trying to make the game all about him and not play for the team. LeBron definitely plays for the team in this series. But the problem is LeBron James is supposed to be a superstar. LeBron, at this point, was the best player in the league. Dirk has a great run. Kobe's still around playing well. Wade is at the probably peak of his powers, if not close. And LeBron's the best guy in the league. But he doesn't play like it in this series. Not even close. LeBron plays like a role player. I kept looking at these games as I go back through and watch it and think, man, Dallas would be happy, would be ecstatic to get some of these performances from Jason Kidd or Shawn Marion. But Miami, to win the title, had to have LeBron James play like a superstar and not like Shawn Marion or Jason Kidd. You have to give credit to Dallas's defense for sure. I think they did a really nice job on switching up LeBron's looks, and the defenders, Shawn Marion and Jason Kidd, did fantastic jobs. But LeBron let Dallas off the hook several times. He deferred to Wade way too much, and he seemed content to let his teammates decide his fate. Now, to some extent, you have to have that happen regardless of how good of a player you are, but you would see in later years, LeBron didn't sit around in 2012 or 2013 or 2016 and just let his Kevin Love or Dwayne Wade or Chris Bosh or whoever decide whether or not he was going to win a title or not. LeBron took the games by the horns and decided them himself a lot of times. Doesn't mean he didn't have help, but there wasn't any semblance of that kind of playing with authority in this 2011 series that you would see later on from him. Now, I do think there is an excuse to be made that is valid. The kind of vitriol and hate and pressure LeBron had to deal with throughout the 2011 season, culminating in this finals, was unprecedented and unlike anything any player ever had. Part of that, though, is LeBron's own doing. Right? He decided to do the TV show. He decided to say the things he did at the pep rally. He didn't make anything easier on himself with going to Miami and dealing with all the hatred that caused. One thing you always hear from people that talk about LeBron in a positive manner is he was a child from a single mother who was basically a child star. Was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was 16, yada, yada, yada. And there's always been this kind of praise for him that he never made a mistake, like with the law, always seemed to be a good citizen, always seemed to be a stand-up guy. And I think this year from LeBron, the decision, the Miami Heat pep rally, the 2011 finals, I think this is his version of that. That it wasn't LeBron getting in trouble with the law or being at strip clubs all the time or whatever you want to say. It was his way of having, it was his built up immaturity coming home to roost. And those of us that sit back and have no clue of what it would be like to be that famous and that have that much pressure, especially at that age, if this is the one thing he has, where you see the results from those years of being basically a child star, I don't think we should look back on it as a huge black mark on his career. Most great players have to go through some sort of growing pains or have to get over some sort of hurdle to really be as great as they can. And I think this is that for LeBron. Dirk was soft, right? That's what everybody said about Dirk for years. He came up short and had bad games and had bad moments in series that were very important. Dirk had to toughen up. He had to get better at dealing with smaller defenders guarding him and getting into him on the perimeter. He had to grow and make changes and be able to become the guy that won this title. We don't give LeBron that same learning curve for this series in 2011. And I think maybe we should. There's long been this idea that if LeBron had played better and Miami had beaten Dallas in this series, that Miami would have three-peated, right? That they would have beaten Dallas, would have beaten Oklahoma City in 2012, and then beaten San Antonio in 2013, and have had a three-peat, won 3 titles instead of the 2 that they actually won. And I think it's almost certainly wrong. If LeBron doesn't go through this, he probably doesn't show up next season with an improved post-game, right? And this leads into at the press conference following the Mavericks winning the championship and the media availability, LeBron is asked a question, does it bother you that so many people are happy to see you fail? And he answers, absolutely not. At the end of the day, all of the people that are rooting for me to fail have to wake up tomorrow and have the same life that they had before they woke up today. Now, a lot of people hated this for LeBron and said he was arrogant and talking down to the little guy. But I don't think at this point, though, it was true. I think that's true now. I think that LeBron doesn't care now what people think of him near as much. In 2011, LeBron cared what people thought of him. He wanted to be liked, and that had to change. At this point, Miami's still Wade's team, and LeBron doesn't have to take the lead. But here's the thing. LeBron had to do that. LeBron James, even at this point, was a better basketball player than Dwayne Wade. But LeBron's personality was to get along. And this was Wade's team in terms of this was his franchise. And his personality was to attack and be aggressive. And LeBron was willing to set back and let Wade be that. And for Miami and LeBron especially to reach their ultimate potential, LeBron couldn't set back and let Wade be the guy. LeBron had to have the reins. And I don't think that happens if Miami wins the 2011 finals, Wade wins the finals MVP. That next year, LeBron doesn't come back and take over the Heat and be the number one alpha, the number one option without question if Miami is successful in 2011 and beats Dallas by playing the way they had all year and with LeBron taking a backseat to Wade. LeBron had to learn how to become mentally tough, or at least more so. I think he'd shown before this point to have mental strength and mental toughness, but he had to learn how to have it on the biggest stage and to fight through adversity when things weren't going his way. The biggest criticism of the Cavs that had won 60-plus games the last 2 seasons and were knocked out early was that they were front runners. And I think LeBron was a little bit of a front runner early on, that when things were going well, LeBron James was a sight to behold. But when things were rough and ugly and not going their way, LeBron wouldn't always dig down and try to stem the tide himself. And I think he had to learn that. And that lesson was learned here in this finals. If LeBron is successful in this finals playing the way he has, or even playing a little bit better and going on to win the title, I don't think the LeBron that shows up the next year and has 30 points in the first half against Boston in Game 6 in Boston, I don't think that guy exists at that point. I think in that same situation, this 2011 version of LeBron loses that game to Boston, or at least doesn't come out and dominate and have the legendary game that he has. I don't think the next year after Ray Allen hits the miracle three to give Miami another game, I don't think this version of LeBron comes out and has the 30 plus points and makes huge shots down the stretch to close out the Spurs, right, in that game 7 in 2013. I definitely don't think this version of LeBron, who doesn't go through this upset and this self-examination and having to mature, is able to come back from being down 3-1 to the Warriors and have the 3-game stretch he does to pull off the biggest upset in NBA Finals history. That guy doesn't exist without going through this pain at this point. So yes, LeBron did choke, but ultimately his career was better for it. I know that may sound stupid. People may think that no one's ever better off for choking, but I think LeBron had some weaknesses both in his actual game and in his approach to winning that had to be ironed out, and they were exposed in this series, and it allowed him to change those and become arguably, one of the 3 best players of all time. That doesn't happen if he doesn't dissect his game and improve after this. So, finally, that leaves me with the last question, in that, how should we remember the 2011 finals? As a series, overall, how should we remember it? And I'm struck by how similar this series actually was to the finals that the following year you see with Oklahoma City and Miami. OKC was the more talented team than Miami. Oklahoma City had home court. They were the favorites going into the series. And they were younger. Had more athleticism and younger legs. But Miami just wanted it more. Durant has said as much in interviews that Miami was simply hungry, and you could tell that Oklahoma City wasn't able to match that at that point in their careers. And I think the same is true for this series with Dallas and Miami, in that Dallas wanted this in a way the Heat couldn't match. Not to say the Heat didn't want it a lot, but Dallas, not just Dirk, but Tyson Chandler and Jason Terry and Jason Kidd, all really stepped up and played with such passion and desire that Miami couldn't quite match. And that's because these guys knew this was their shot. They hadn't won a championship, and they had to get it done. And that's what you see from Miami the next year against Oklahoma City. Dallas definitely wanted it more than Miami. I think the difference in the series was, with LeBron especially, but the Heat were scared of losing, of not winning, more so than being determined to win. Dallas was determined to win. They weren't playing with the idea of not to lose. They were playing with the idea of conquering and seizing the championship finally. It's still obvious, though, that it mattered a lot to Miami. A lot of people have mocked Chris Bosh for, after Miami loses, they have footage of LeBron, Wade, and Bosh and everybody walking back through the tunnel in Miami, and Bosh is crying. And people have mocked him for this. And I'll tell you right now, I hate that, because I always want to see these guys care that much. People have done the same thing to Joel Embiid from the past playoffs when the Sixers lost to the Raptors. And I hate when people do that. Because it's not about being a man or not being a man or whatever you want to say. These guys actually care enough to cry and are that emotional. And it, as a fan, it shows you that they are that invested and that they want to win that much. And I think having those moments should be seen as bonding to the fans and how much they care, instead of being moments for ridicule. I'm not ridiculous enough to think my little podcast series is going to change any larger narrative, but I think it should be remembered more so for an example of how players have to go through struggles and improve to be great, and that the desire to win and what it takes to do so is a process you have to learn, and go through struggles, that it's not just something that somebody has because they're clutch or alpha or whatever, that you have to actually, it's a process. I think this final should be remembered simply as this is the moment Dirk conquered his demons, and that LeBron had to confront his. Without this series, Dirk is viewed completely differently. But so is LeBron. So that was the 2011 NBA Finals. Very controversial series. Probably a bigger topic than I thought it was going to be. I'll be back soon with another topic that will not take 4 episodes and almost 6 hours to cover. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at NBA Legacy Pod. I also have a Patreon at patreon.com/NBA Legacy Podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, please do. I already have a bonus episode up on Patreon for anybody who would like to support the podcast. It's the award picks for 2019-2020. And that'll do it for this episode of the NBA Legacy Podcast. Until next time.